Hello there and welcome to our 24 special coverage over the Ukraine-Russia war, the so-called special military operation. Ukraine is preparing to mark a truly historic week as the country awaits a decision on its candidate status for the European Union and girds itself for an aggressive new round of attacks from Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Sunday the European Council is expected to issue a decision on whether Ukraine will become a candidate to join the bloc after a summit in Brussels Thursday and Friday. An endorsement from 27 EU member states would be the first step on what could be a years-long path. On the battlefield, Ukrainian forces repelled a Russian attempt to break through near the village of Toshkivka in the eastern part of Ukraine, the governor of the Lugansk region said Sunday. Yet, the Russian troops claimed they have gained a huge success. All in all, to analyze all this information, I'm joined live via Skype platform by Mr. Leonid Savin, Director of Foundation of Monitoring and Forecasting, Chief Editor of Geopolitica, Russia think tank, member of Military Scientific Society of the Ministry of Defense of Russia, and from Ukraine, Mykola Volkevsky, member advisor to Chairman Committee, Parliament of Ukraine. Gentlemen, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to this debate. The discussions begins right after this break. And before we delve into our discussion, let me start with this information, ladies and gentlemen. Russia seized a village near Ukraine's industrial city of Severodonetsk, a prime target of Moscow's campaign to control the country's east. As the head of NATO predicted, the war could last for years. Russia's defense ministry said it had won Metyolkin, a settlement of fewer than 800 people before the war began. Russia's state news agency TASS reported that many Ukrainian fighters had surrendered there.
The offensive against Severodonetsk is proceeding successfully. Units of the People's Militia of the Luhansk People's Republic, supported by the Russian armed forces, have liberated the locality of Metyolkin.
Mr. Savin, let me start with you. The Russian troops, if the Russian troops succeeded and could manage to take control over the eastern part of the country in general and the Donbass region precisely, the question is, what would be the next move? Will Russia keep moving again toward another target, or it will stop over that region precisely?
No, it's a region of Lugansk People Republic, and there is also Donetsk People Republic, and both entities should to liberate full territories and to start sovereignty for the people living there. Then, but already land forces of Russia presented in Kherson region, in Zaporozhye region, and in Kharkov region, and I think they will going forward to control more territories and to organize security buffer. And of course, from a strategic point of view, it will be very important to control Odessa region and to cut the rest of Ukraine from the sea coast. But we should remember the goals of military operation, denazification. And there is air strikes on all territory of Ukraine, not only the east part. So it will be continued and depends on the resistance from Ukrainian side.
Quite interesting. Mr. Mykola, if Ukraine could save its eastern part of the country from the Russians, would that be safe enough to secure the whole country, or there will be measures to be taken for a better and strong protection? If so, what kind of protection it could provide without being a NATO member?
I know it's important because we all the time we receive the information that some of the villages now is under control of Russia. but we need to check double, because it's one of the situation is mostly on the untrue, on fake, because all the time we receive information, like for example from Russia side, from Ukrainian side. Even now, we cannot say that even 100% of the Severodonetsk now it's under control of the Russia. Yes, it's some villages in Metelki, and even this was approved yesterday by Sergei Gadai, the leader of Lugansk region. He said that this village is under control of the Russia, but we don't need to remind this. Mr. Zelensky said this city of Severodonetsk can be, the destiny can be the nearly future be under control of the Ukraine. But also it's most important step what we need to do. We need to save Slovyansk, this city, because it's also important city from whole of this region. But Sarah mentioned it, the Odessa. Odessa, it's Ukrainian territory. By the way, the members also the territories now, which is control of the Russia, now try to be controlled back by Ukrainian side, because we are moving forward, to take back the Kherson, in even Kherson region. Kherson, which is 10 kilometers from this position, but actually it's what's the main goal, denazification. Which kind of the Nazi they tried, to find on these places like Severodonetsk or Lugansk and Donetsk region. For me, it's like untrue and fake, but actually we will see what will be next. You mean like by the NATO, by the European side, because we already mentioned with Ukraine, now we're waiting for official voting to be the European Union member. A lot of important summits now it's proceed by even in Riga. It's a 3C summit with also with Poland, and also it's kind of this international events now around the Ukrainian war interested. But we will see next which kind of steps will the Ukrainian Minister of Defense of Ukrainian Army, to defend all of this region, including Donetsk and Lugansk region. Thank you.
Understood. Mr. Savin, coming back to you, what is close to be accepted and what is true? Is it the statements of the Ukrainian president saying that the Donbas region is still not being taken, or we believe on the Russian troops saying that it is all our part right now?
We heard many misinformation and many political rhetoric from President Zelensky. So, of course, we have a very own point of view on what happens, what there in the region. And of course, we need to remember that most of people living there, and after 8 years under very strong pressure and very strong repression from Ukrainian regime, they would like to join Russia. And they also talks about referendum and Lugansk People Republic and Donetsk People Republic to join to Russia. The same like in Kherson region and like in Zaporozhye region. Many would like to be in Russia because it's more safe and more prosperity than in Ukraine. And every day, Mr. Zelensky told something, some surrealistic and some fantastic. And before he told that, for example, Eurovision song contest will be in Mariupol city, but now it's under control of Russia. And this festival will be in the UK, not in Ukraine. I would just think we should be more careful to listen to the political rhetoric of Mr. Zelensky.
Understood. All right, moving on to the second point. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to defend the country's south in an address recorded on his way back from the visit to the regions of Mykolaiv and Odessa along the Black Sea. Why this visit to the city of Mykolaiv in the country's south? Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky assured that the soldiers were keeping their morale up and were confident in their triumph over Russian forces.
I came back from the south. Today I visit our advanced positions in the Mykolaiv region. I visited Mykolaiv and also the Odessa region. I spoke to our defenders, the military, the police, the National Guards, the territorial defense. They are confident, and it's obvious that they don't doubt our victory.
Mr. Mikola, coming back to you, previously, just in the 21st of May last month, Ukraine's President Zelensky said that only diplomacy can end the war in Ukraine. At the same time now, he's still calling the Western allies to keep delivering weapons, and he keep encouraging his soldiers to fight until the end. Isn't that a sort of contradiction of what he is looking for? And don't you think that as long as the war goes longer, it serves the interests of others?
First of all, I would like to say that we already had peaceful talks with Russia. For example, in the first stage of these talks in the end of February in early March in Belarus, and also this kind of dialogue with Russia in Turkey, in Ankara, and also with other cities in Turkey. But we already tried, to figure out and try to have this kind of diplomatic talks with the Russia side. Just try to remember that Mr. Podolak, Mr. Arahamian from Ukrainian, the servant of the People political party, joined on the Ukrainian side this kind of talks. But we don't have such a big results with Russia now. But after these 2 rounds of these talks, we don't know actually where will the next step by the Russia on Ukrainian side about the diplomacy, how they can or where they can make this kind of summit between 2 presidents or between 2 delegations. Maybe it will be in this summer, maybe next. We don't know actually, but it's true. But the allies of Ukraine, including the European Union, including the USA, they tried it, and they also delivered it for Ukraine, the military, because we need to defend our country. Because it's not Ukraine that attacked Russia. Russia entered Ukraine on 24th of February. It's all of the peaceful world.
Sorry to cut your train of thought, Mr. Mikola, but it is said if the Western allies, I mean UK, US, keep delivering weapons, it means they don't want diplomacy to succeed. They want war to continue. What are you saying about this?
I mean, we need to defend the country as well, because without this additional military support, we know it will be difficult, because we know the territory, how it's territory of Russia, how it's territory of Ukraine. But Ukraine, we defend the country more than 100 days. It's important. But kind of diplomacy now it still exists, but also I try to remind, we don't know what will be the results of important summits in Brussels, G7, for example, and NATO, which kind of debates will be talked about the Ukraine, about the war, etc. But after the visit of Mr. Emmanuel Macron, Mr. Mario Draghi, and Olaf Scholz and Klaus Johannes, who kind of saw these leaders was changed because they saw how it's a disaster, how biggest problem, how Russia, destroyed the cities near Kiev, near Irpin. They changed its points of view, and even Caesars will be delivered as soon as possible from the French side to Ukraine. Actually, I don't know which kind of agreements, which kind of diplomatic talks will provide it in the future, but I think it can be. But also we need to understand it just need to be the territory which Ukraine received 24th of August 1991 since Ukrainian independence. It's what Ukrainian President Zelensky mentioned all the time.
Understood. Before coming to you, Mr. Savin, let's tackle this report. NATO's Secretary General John Stoltenberg said that the war in Ukraine could last for years as the Russian army is making progress after concentrating its forces on the eastern Donbas region.
So NATO must maintain...
In a statement to a German newspaper, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg predicted that the war would last for years and that supplying Ukrainian forces with the latest weapons would enhance the chance of liberating the eastern Donbas region from the Russian control.
We need to prepare for the fact that the war could take years. We cannot give up supporting Ukraine, even if the costs are high, not just in military support, but also in rising energy and food prices.
In turn, the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights, Simon Gilmore, visited the Ukrainian towns of Irpin and Bucha on Sunday. Speaking to reporters, Gilmore said the world couldn't turn a blind eye to the crimes committed by the Russian army in Ukraine and that those who gave the orders should be brought to justice.
We talk not only about those who committed the crime, the direct crime, on the spot and in location. They, of course, have responsibility. But we're also talking about those who are in the chain of command, if necessary, right to the very top. But that has to be pursued by investigation of those who are carrying it out.
This comes as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky expects Russian army concentrated in the east to intensify its attacks, trying to take complete control of the Donbas, while Kiev awaits European Union decision this week on granting Ukraine the status of a candidate country.
Mr. Salvin, let's be clear to one point. Russia's main target behind this military operation was to stop the NATO expansion eastward Europe. But now, some Scandinavian countries applied to join this alliance, and even the Baltic countries dared to close their airspace for the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov last week. I mean, could we say Russia has failed to reach its decisive goal, which is preventing NATO to be enlarged precisely near the Russian borders?
In December, Russia proposed to organize new frame for European security, and collective West rejected it. So it was also the reason we started this military operation in Ukraine. But Baltic states already members of the NATO, and both Sweden and Finland already cooperated with NATO for many years. They provided funds to NATO. They doing joint military exercise on the territory of Finland and NATO. Also providing troops for operation in Iraq, for example, in Afghanistan. So. In fact, they already cooperating with NATO and the United States. And from other point of view, both countries confirmed that Russia is not threat for both countries. So it's very strange why they would like to join NATO. And they also European guarantees for security. So it will be kind of victory of Washington, I think. It's strange policy of European countries. But we see that in European Union, many kind of satellites of Washington, they have not real sovereignty. From Russia point of view, of course, we will do countermeasures against Finland and Sweden, like we already done for many European countries. So it will be a process for years.
Understood. Mr. Mikkola, how can you explain the NATO moves and the new applications of the Scandinavian countries in this precise time, where the situation is intense in the ground of the battlefield, as well as within the diplomatic efforts?
I try to also say that in 10-11 of January, it was kind of bilateral talks between NATO and Russia in Brussels, on the level of the ministers of foreign affairs, of the deputy minister of foreign affairs. Russia proposed, to which kind of strategy, from whole of the region did, and also the Bucharest Agreement 2008, if I'm not wrong, they was like to say that it cannot be the new all countries of NATO not exist, for example, because Russia don't want, to, for example, some kind of Scandinavian countries join NATO, but this kind of movements by the Finland, by the Sweden, it's not something new. It's all the time this country remembers, remind that they try to be the member of the NATO. We don't know actually what will be the 29 or 30 in Madrid, because it's this NATO summit exists. And I just try to also say that this last summit from Jens Stoltenberg as a Secretary General of NATO. Who is with the next Secretary General of NATO, we don't know yet. But from the reason, like the Sauli Niinistö, the president of Finland, or from the Sweden side, they would like to be the new NATO members, because it's a problem of collective security. Now they need to be more secure by the allies, who is already the members of the NATO. When we will see after the summit if these two countries will be the new members of NATO or not. But between the parliament and president of Finland and Sweden, a lot of politicians, they're gonna vote positively. They would like to be the new members, but we don't know actually how it will be the idea of Erdogan, because we know that Turkey also the member of NATO, because he already mentioned it. He already mentioned it in Sweden, a lot of terrorists or something like that. It was some of his interview from some magazines. We don't know actually how Turkey will develop and how will they negotiate about the future membership of these two Scandinavian countries of NATO. Thank you.
Quite understood. Mr. Savin, briefly, do you think that Sweden and Finland will be accepted?
Personally, I'm skeptical because of Turkey position and some other countries, like Croatia, for example, and some member of NATO, of European Union.
Quite understood. Now, moving on to another point, the head of the European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, on Monday accused Russia of committing a true war crimes by blocking Ukrainian grain exports at the risk of increasing famine in the world. Ahead of a meeting of the EU foreign ministers in Luxembourg, Borrell said that world's population is suffering from hunger due to millions of tons of wheat stuck in Ukraine.
I am sure that the United Nations will at the end reach an agreement. It's inconceivable. One cannot imagine. One cannot imagine that millions of tons of wheat remain blocked in Ukraine while in the rest of the world people are suffering hunger. This is a real war crime. So I cannot imagine that this will last much longer. Millions of tons of wheat is being blocked. And millions of people will not be able to eat this wheat. So the war is going to have dramatic consequences for the world. We call to Russia to deblocade the ports.
Mr. Salvin, Luca Russo, who works as an analyst for food crisis within the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, he said that we need to clarify that today there is no global food shortage. Food is available. To give you a number, each year the world produces about 708 million metric tons of wheat, and the shortage for this year is only 3 million. So how is Ukraine crisis threatening food supply?
I am agreed that there's huge speculation about food crisis in the world, and just West would like to keep on control on the supply chains for the food and to provide food by and through our stocks and markets. Ukraine is an important producer for crops mostly, and farmers for this kind of production. And there is still a problem with one port that is really blocked, but not blocked by Russia because it's mined by Ukrainian forces in Odessa. And our leadership already proposed just do security in your port, and we will allow any kind of transport vessels to your port. It's not problem. So just there should be decision done in Ukraine, not in Russia. And from other point of view, of course, we should see on this crisis not only like a front line between Ukraine and Russia, but to see like the end of unipolarity world order and start multipolarity. And Russia proposed new rules for the next geopolitical game for different countries. And Russia already cooperating with Asian and African countries for food supplies. So many can to join to this process. It's open frame, and I think it will be very useful for many countries who still depend on the food supply.
Quite understand. Mr. Mikola report said that the world was already witnessing the food crisis in several countries, especially the African ones, due to the severe drought and economic crisis. So why would Ukraine and the West pointing finger to Russia as the main reason for this food crisis and grain shortages?
Some weeks ago, the Ukrainian visitor World Food Program head David Beasley, he said it's the biggest problem, for food because they tried, to continue to send wheat, for example, to these countries, but that's now it's possible because it's blocked of the Black Sea. Even I know the Turkey proposal, the bilateral talks between Çavuşoğlu and Lavrov, and I don't know. I know that it wasn't some positive movements and positive results of these bilateral talks in Turkey last week. But it's true by the satellites we see it's from Kherson region, for example, a lot of million tons of Ukrainian wheat was stolen by the Russians, to the Crimea. It's true. They tried, to deliver to steal this wheat from this region, which now is under control by the Russia. It's also the big problem, but also for the food crisis, it will be one of the main idea to future the summits and forums around the world, because it also can be the big problem. But I know the Russians, to try to negotiate with the African countries in the African Union, how to figure out with this food crisis on it, because we don't know how it will be the next 6 months, for example. Due to the information to David Beasley from World Food Programme, it will be the big disaster, from whole countries of the world, including Africa as well.
Now, moving on to another point you discussed, probably the last one due to the lack of time. European Commission President said Georgia has a strong EU membership application, but they had to come together politically and addressing certain priorities, leaving the Black Sea nation heartbroken. Meanwhile, the Commission proposed making Moldova an EU membership candidate.
Georgia shares the same aspirations and potential as Ukraine and Moldova. Its application has strength, in particular, the market orientation of its economy with a strong private sector. To succeed, the country must now come together politically to design a clear path towards structural reform and the European Union, a path that concretely sets out the necessary reforms, brings on board civil society, and benefits from broad political support. This is why we recommend to Council to grant the European perspective and to come back and assess how Georgia meets the number of conditions before granting its candidate status.
Mr. Mikola, coming back to Europe's unity over the war in Ukraine is at risk as public attention increasingly shifts from the battlefield to cost of living concerns. A survey in 9 EU members states found that despite strong support across Europe for Ukraine's bid to join the EU and the West's policy of cutting ties with Moscow, many voters in Europe want the war to end as soon as possible, even if that means Ukraine losing territory. What are you saying about this?
I think everybody in Ukraine wants this war will finish, and they would like to beg from the Europe, or for example. But it's not it's a big problem because everybody is mentioning it was the territory. Because how it's this kind of countries we talk about the Ukraine. Ukraine have this territory which we receive it's in Ukrainian independence. But actually about the European Union and last Eastern Partnership Summit, because it was in December last year, in 15th of December, it was like an idea that 3 countries, it's Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine, will join the European Union as soon as possible. But this was before the Russia attack. Russia started the war in Ukraine on 24th of February. But due to information from Sulame Zurabishvili, the president of Georgia, or Mai Sandu, the president of Moldova, they tried to also prepare the application to be in the future the members of European Union. But actually, all of these results, all of this topic will be negotiated in Brussels, and we will see after the results about the memoranda declaration from the Ursula von der Leyen and from the European Union. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's true. It's kind of members of European Union. They don't want you to be the Ukraine or European Union member. I mean, like Viktor Orban and the regime Orban and Hungary. And also, we don't pretty sure that this country will vote positively, because to be the real member of European Union, all of 27 countries need positively vote to be and the result to be the new and accept a new member of European Union. We will see what will be the next in Brussels and last week, and we will see about how its result will develop. Thank you.
Understood. Mr. Salvin, there is an ongoing protest right now in Brussels, says that it's about high cost of living. Do you think that the Russian military operation played a major role to push European countries to their limits?
It was kind of catalyst, not a major role of Russia, because European country imposed sanctions from 2014 against Russia. But of course, we cannot play the rules imposed by European nations to Russia, and we have our sovereignty, our independence. And everyone should remember that time awaits play for Russia. And I think till autumn there will be more serious problems in European countries with energy resources, with inflation, with many different kind of with weapon also supplies to Russia. And Europe should to start negotiations with Russia, and we will see what happens there and how negotiation process will start. Russia will be in more a powerful position in the autumn time. So it's a real serious problem of European policy, of Brussels policy, and of European politicians in many countries, mostly in Germany, and France, and Italy.
Very good indeed. Mr. Mikola, 1 minute left to end this show. So, Mr. Savin is a Russian, so what would you say to a Russian? What is the main solution that Ukraine is looking for?
The main solution is Ukraine looking for, to as soon as possible finish the war with Ukrainian territory, to take Ukrainian territory back, because that everybody's understand, the whole real world understand that the Ukrainians need to be the all of territories, but actually nobody can recognize it's a lot of kind of this quasi republic on Donetsk and Lugansk Republic as independent territory on the future of the territory of the Russia. We need to understand. But we live in the 21st century, where political realism more developed. We will see will be the next, but I'm sure that Ukraine gonna win, because it will be the one winner of this war, and it will be Ukraine. Thank you.
Understood. Mr. Savin, from your part, what are you saying for our Ukrainian guest, Mr. Mikola?
I think that if Ukraine more to resist in future, Ukraine will lose more territories. It's very clear. Because geopolitical games is changing, and now Ukraine should to follow what Russia proposed and how to deal with Russia. And of course, we should remember not only about Lugansk and Donetsk People Republics, but also Kosovo. It's especially when West talk about that there is no right to recognize the Lugansk and Donetsk region. Yes, we have right, because from Western point of view, they recognize it Kosovo. And from our point of view, we have our right to recognize Lugansk and Donetsk Republic.
Perfect.
And next will be Kherson region and Mora region of Ukraine.
Thank you ever so much, Mr. Savin from Russia, Mr. Mikola from Ukraine. Thank you ever so much for your thorough analysis. Thank you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on L24 News. Bye for now.